Good morning, everyone. Oh, it's afternoon, evening in America, but morning in Australia. I'm going to be covering Max's video on Gene Kim. It's called Max Bauer Refutes Gene Kim on Work Salvation. And of course, Gene Kim has a sinner's prayer, which I'm against. Okay, we'll hide that full screen. Okay.
Well, we are back again, and today we're going to take a look at Gene Kim's video here, how Satan lied about the Old Testament salvation. This is where Gene Kim actually has the courage to answer some of the arguments that come against his faith works system. And, you know, I give him kudos and props for attempting to put down our arguments. Not a very good job, though. He's adding a lot of confusion to people, and he is, in this sense, preaching to his choir. These are people that, this is a classroom setting where I'm sure that the people need to regurgitate this stuff for a test. There won't be a whole lot of dissension there. But at least he does address some of the points that we bring up. So let's take a look here at what Gene Kim says.
Okay.
We're going to look at some of these passages about what they use for dispensational salvation. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. It's Hebrews 11, excuse me, right? Hebrews 11. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. Now, what I want you all...
This apparently is part of the same, from what he has on the board, a part of the same speech that he was doing from the other video that was put up.
Right.
Or again, he's talking about Ed.
All to do is to read it. Read verses Hebrews chapter 11 from verses 4 all the way to the end of the chapter. So I've explained this to you about these Old Testament saints that they had faith.
I think Gene needs to reread what Hebrews is saying. By faith,
by
Abel,
faith,
by
faith,
Enoch, by faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please
him. It's faith.
By faith, Noah. By
the
faith,
works
Abraham.
Don't save.
Notice faith is always first here, right? And they say, well, yeah, that's why it's faith plus works, because the works come later.
Every Christian should work, but not for salvation.
Now, originally, this came out as Jews under the law. It was faith plus works. But now we're expanding upon that and saying all of the Old Testament. And again, you got to say, well, what about the people who didn't do works then? You know, like the Gentiles or people who knew nothing of it. And he does get into this. I did watch some of this video, and I watched Ed's video on this. But the arguments that he gives as a rebuttal to that are stupid. And they go against the character of God, which is why I did a short video on the character of God. It's going to come into play here.
Faith and works. That's what you're going to find out, faith and works. So
no,
faith alone. Gene Kim,
why that he's going through so many verses in a bullet.
I do faith and works too. Okay, I have faith and I give out Bibles as works. I do a YouTube channel as works. Do those things save me?
No,
they don't save me. No. Christians should be doing works. It's part of their walk.
Yep.
What is that? He doesn't want you to study. Well, no, it's because the reason why is I'm trying to cram in all things in a small amount of time. I don't have the benefit and the luxury of time like you do, turning 60 years of age with my skin turning white, dedicating hundreds of videos because my church members need to hear more stuff. They can't just hear me kicking.
And you have a sinner's prayer, which is sending people to hell. Gene Kim.
I can't waste time with that.
The little group.
Now,
the little group of every other dispensational teaching out there other than Peter Ruckman. Now, granted, I am not a
the asking doesn't save. Robbie's right there.
Has teach, but of everything I've read, everybody has been denouncing Peter Ruckman's idea of salvation, and to my knowledge, he is the only guy who taught it. Gene Kim said he is the only guy who taught it. So who is right here and who is wrong, and who should be taking a second look? And I'll bring it up again, the fact Gene Kim works for PBI.
Yep.
Okay, he's part of the Institute. So can he decide one day that dispensational salvation is not correct and teach his own thing? Not if he wants to work for PBI and be associated with them, he can't. It's apparently a very core doctrine of theirs because that's what sets apart Ruckmanism form of dispensationalism with everybody else. It's a key thing.
Another thing to understand is not all people who do not believe in dispensational salvations, I'm not kicking those people, okay? Sometimes they're just genuinely trying to search and study, and they have genuine questions, and it's going to take time. I understand that. But who I'm against is that those guys who are calling out Bible-believing preachers and then addressing them by name, critiquing them, thinking that they're dumb, they're stupid and all that. So
You're
I'm
the one
going
who's
to
calling people
like you're
stupid,
dumb and you're
Gene
stupid
Kim.
because the scriptures show it. Okay, now in Hebrews,
When you say that there's, sometimes I use general terms too, but if there's one particular person out there preaching it, or if I bring up a video like in this case, yeah, you name the person who's saying it so the person can see for themselves that who is actually saying it. Warning people about things doesn't do a ton of good without directly giving an example of who is preaching heresy.
chapter 11, when you read all of that, their excuse is this: because this shows faith and works. In Hebrews chapter 11, I have to explain, that way people don't get lost, and then I'll explain as best as I can. So Old Testament salvation, we obviously know, is different from Christian salvation. Christian salvation was faith, not works. Whereas the Old Testament, that you had faith and works.
Your sinner's prayer is a work. Gene Kim, how many people are you sending to hell?
What about the book of James, Gene Kim? Oh, you got to take that out of the New Testament and place it in the Old Testament, or you have to put it in the future in the tribulation. That's what you have to do with the book of James.
Now, their way around it is when you look at Hebrews chapter 11, this is their argument. Obviously, when you read Hebrews 11, you see faith and works, right? That's pretty obvious. By
It's
faith,
faith
no
alone.
works. He had
You see faith and works. By faith, by faith, by faith, by
Faith.
faith, by faith.
There's no works there.
And there is works
Gene
that they
Kim?
did because of their faith. The works coming after faith.
faith. Then you see a work. He built an ark. By faith,
Yeah.
Abraham
I give
Yeah,
out
faith.
Bibles.
moved outside of his homeland. There's a
I
work.
do a YouTube channel.
So this is pretty obvious. Dispensational
I do a
salvation
YouTube
is
channel?
literally looking at the verse and just telling you what it simply is.
Okay,
So
let's look
it
at a
said
verse.
faith. Why? Because it said faith. Why is it works? Because it is a work when you move to a different homeland, when you build an ark.
When you do a YouTube channel, it's a work.
That's
When
right.
you teach at PBI Institute, it's a
A
work.
work.
It is a work when you're suffering torture and persecution. If you read Hebrews 11,
It is a work when
Work.
you're doing a YouTube channel and you're getting
That's
copyright
right.
strikes by people who believe different doctrine than you and bullying strikes. It is a work to continue doing it. Spending great amount of hours for very little compensation. It is a work.
okay? We're just simply reading as it says. That's what makes us King James dispensationalists, because we believe in reading the word as it says in the King James Bible, and we rightly divide the salvation.
It makes it sound like nobody else does that. It's only the Peter Ruckman guys and PBI Institute that do that. It's only Gene Kim that does that. Us v them.
These guys, they refuse to divide the salvation, and they don't read the King James Bible as it says. That shows
We do refuse to divide salvation as an eternal salvation.
Yep.
These guys are really mixing words with physical salvation and eternal salvation.
Exactly. Max.
They're really flip-flopping when it suits their needs.
something concerning if you want to be a King James dispensationalist truly. Now, you know how they interpret it? This is so complicated. We interpret it like very simply, right? Very simply, all you have to do is that it said faith and works. It said that, but we just divide it. That's in the Old Testament. Isn't that simple?
You just
Now,
decided to
these
do
guys
that.
make it complicated. What they do is, no, what this is that this is
We just
truly
decided
salvation
to.
by faith alone.
We just decided to do this because it fits our doctrine. We just decided to take James and put that in the tribulation period. Suits our doctrine. Whatever.
Not works, but those works are just simply demonstrating their faith. Now, how
Yes.
is that not really salvation by faith alone, right? See, they're trying to complicate the argument. So let me interpret it for you so that it can be easier for you to understand.
There's
What-
nothing complicated about this at all. Everybody is saved by faith.
Yep,
What is
that's
complicated
right.
about that?
What they mean is this. When Noah built that ark, his work, that was just simply a work showing his faith. But
Right.
his salvation was really actually by faith. Okay, so what did he believe in? Noah's salvation by faith was that he believed what God told him.
Right.
That's the idea. So what
Faith
these
in the
guys are
Lord.
going to argue is that these Old Testament saints, their salvation by faith, it may be different from us having faith in Jesus, but they were still saved by faith alone.
Right.
How? Because they believed in what God said to them.
Right.
That's what they argue. So because Noah believed what God said about the flood or the ark, that's what saved him, that faith.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
he built the ark, that had nothing to do with it. That was just a work showing it. See, that's how they argue.
Right.
But
It had
it's
nothing to do with
physical
his physical or his spiritual
salvation.
He built the ark because he believed God. He
Yep.
walked with God.
Yeah, if he didn't believe, then he wouldn't have
to
built
say
the
that
ark.
that Noah had faith in God, like he didn't see God or didn't know God, is ridiculous when the Bible plainly says he walked with God. So therefore, his faith, he had faith in that what God was telling him would come true. Obvious.
You see? Now you can tell they had to take a lot of time and thinking to explain that to you.
No,
Now,
not at all. Not at all. Back when I was still kicking around in Denlinger camp, and after I came out of it, I understood that people were always saved by faith. I didn't have the background and full understanding and done a full study on it. I'm a lot more versed in this now than I was even a year ago. But even myself, not doing a huge study, understood it was always saved by faith. It's the only way that it could be.
the idea is that this is easily debunked. Okay, let's assume that this faith that Noah had about believing what God said about building an ark or that there's a flood, that's what saved him, and his work of building the ark showed it. Here's an easy debunking to that. What if he then didn't build that ark?
That's an easy
Then-
debunking of it.
Then he wouldn't have had faith.
Noah would die.
Would die.
That's what would happen if he didn't build the ark. And you know what would happen? God would probably raise him up, just like he did Jonah. Right? Jonah didn't do what God told him to do. Jonah got killed, went to hell and prayed to God, and he got raised back up and God said, no, go to Nineveh. That's what happened to Noah. That's what happened to Noah. He built the ark, though. He believed God and did it. If he
That's
didn't do it,
right.
he'd die. Simple as that.
What if he didn't do that work of building the ark? Then that invalidates his faith
How?
of what he believed in, that God told him that there would be a flood and he has to build the
He
ark.
wouldn't have had faith.
Okay.
He didn't do it. Gene Kim's a silly Billy.
The gymnastics here is mind-boggling. Why would Noah not build the ark if he had faith and believed God? Why would he not do it? Okay, the argument is dumb. But let's just say Noah said, yeah, God said it's going to rain and he's going to kill all flesh on the planet, and he gave me the blueprints for a boat, but I'm not going to do it. He knows it's true, but he's not going to do it.
So you know what that means? Whether you like it or not, that work is necessary for his salvation.
Physical salvation, yeah.
Physical
See, this is so
salvation,
easy. The
yes.
same thing with
Not
Abraham. and a
eternal
lot of people.
salvation. Gene Kim,
How are you bringing Abraham into this? How is that the same as Abraham? We're talking about physical salvation. Where is Abraham's physical salvation?
Now, here's another thing. If they say right here that, no. Actually, no. Even if Noah didn't do that work, or Abraham or all these other people, even if they didn't do that work, that didn't count for their salvation.
Right?
That had nothing to do with it. They were still saved by faith. Then my question is this. Then what is their salvation by faith in?
Belief in God.
Because their
Believe in
salvation by
God.
faith, like what you said, was what God told them. Okay, on what? On what? Be specific.
Whatever
Oh,
happened
well,
to
with
be.
Noah, God told him there would be a flood and build the ark. Okay, that was that faith.
Whatever it happened to be at the time. Yeah, this is a different time we're speaking of. We're way, way, way back in history with this stuff. And how God revealed himself, we don't fully know. We just have what's in the Bible. When the Bible plainly says, however, regardless of what we don't know about what's going on, the Bible plainly says that Noah walked with God and was seen as righteous before anything about the flood came up. Anything about God telling Noah, yeah, I'm going to judge the world and you got to build a boat. That happened after we know that Noah was righteous and walked with God.
Yep.
We also know Abraham was righteous, and because he was righteous, he was chosen to start the nation of Israel. Does that mean that nobody else in the time of Abraham was saved? No. How was Melchizedek saved? He didn't have the works of the law, but he was a high priest of the Most High God. How did his system work? Did Melchizedek have faith works in his system? Or was he saved by faith? There's a couple of interesting stories I covered on the Bible Basics series, is where Abraham always continually refers to his wife as his sister when he goes into these new towns. Because apparently some of these towns are so wicked that apparently you just kill the husband and then take their wife and steal them for yourself. And not knowing what their disposition was toward God and morality, he would say that Sarah was his sister. He goes in, and Pharaoh in the first one likes Sarah, and Pharaoh is a God-fearing man, knows who God is. The second time it was Abimelech. Abimelech is a God-fearing man. Abraham makes the explanation, is like, oh, I didn't know that you guys feared God, so I just said she was my sister, which is technically true. She's my half-sister. The reason those stories are in there is to let you know there's some other God-fearing people out there, and what is going on with the works and the sacrifices and things is particular to the Jews, to be a peculiar people to bring in and show God to the world.
He believed in. What if he didn't do that work then? Then that faith didn't count.
What?
See that?
It
So
works the
whether
other
you
way
like it or
around.
not, that work is.
It works the other way around. Your works don't count if you don't have faith.
Exactly.
That's how it works. Your works do not count if you don't have faith. If you have faith and you do works, that's counted for crowns of righteousness in heaven.
That's right.
Necessary. Then they make us so confused. No, that work is actually not really necessary for their salvation. Okay, then what did he have faith in then? What did he have to believe in? That there would be a flood and he had to build an ark. Okay, what if he didn't do that work then? Then you see this confusion?
It's not confusing. Noah would die. There's nothing confusing about that. Again, Jonah, he didn't do the work until he got killed.
See, this is a circular pattern, but they cleverly disguised it where you don't see it because they just simply use
And
words
then
like,
Jonah is a perfect example for many reasons, but Jonah is a prophet of God. He is a prophet of God. He had faith in God, trusted it, knew God was telling the truth, knew he should obey God, and he didn't.
That's right.
Does that mean that Jonah was lost? Because he didn't do the works. He didn't do them. He got killed. Scripture with scripture, people. Scripture with scripture. The character of God. Come on.
works demonstrating their faith. They just simply say stuff like, it's not that work that really saved them, it's their faith that saved them. They just believe what God told them. But see, what they refuse to do is get into more specifics. As long as it sounds good and it's abstract, and you don't dig into it, and they fool you, they trick you. That's the idea.
Fooling and tricking. Okay, now I don't believe that anyone in the Peter Ruckman camp is intentionally trying to fool people completely. I think that they do believe what they're teaching is correct. However, they know that there's some holes in this argument and they're trying to kind of fluff over them because they're not equipped to answer the arguments correctly. And they're focusing on salvation being always a spiritual salvation. And they're using some little tricks. Do I think that they're outright liars? No. I think that they believe what they're teaching, but I don't think that they have the capability of defending it fully, their position.
Right.
Really, I don't think they can defend it at all. But yes, but we're the ones who are completely lying. We're knowingly trying to deceive people for some reason. I don't know. But that's what he's saying.
So here's something that they're going to have to agree with then. If they then have no choice but to believe that these people, these works demonstrated their faith, otherwise their faith is not genuine, their salvation by faith is not genuine, they have to have these works.
What?
Isn't this lordship salvation?
No. I missed part of this here, but he's referring to us in that they have to have these works. He is putting that in our mouths. We're not saying that they had to have any of those works. They are things that they did as part of their walk with God and their fellowship with God. If I'm walking around and talking with God and he tells me something, you better believe I'm going to do it. What? I'm going to have to back this up a little bit so you exactly hear what he's talking about.
Genuine. Their salvation by faith is not genuine. They have to have these works.
Their salvation by faith is not genuine without doing the works.
Isn't this lordship salvation? If you're truly saved by this faith, your works will show. See, they don't like that. They're trying to say, oh no, we're not lordship.
That's not the crux of lordship salvation. I mean, that's kind of their cover story.
And
but
you have a sinner's prayer, Gene
generally,
Kim.
yes, you're supposed
How
to
many people
do
you
works
sending
if you're
to
saved.
hell?
So I'm not sure. The lordship position thing is faith plus works, which is exactly what Gene Kim teaches and Peter Ruckman. So this is confusing to me.
By faith is not genuine. They have to have these works. Isn't this lordship salvation? If you're truly saved,
we don't say that they have to have works. We
That's
believe in the one
right.
saved, always saved by faith through grace in every dispensation. Works is what you're supposed to do. If you want blessings from God, you're going to do the works. If you want to be cursed by God, don't do the works. You want to carry on in whatever sort of reprobate lifestyle you have that's completely contrary to what God wants you to be doing, you're going to end up like Jonah or some of these other people. See, God doesn't have a problem striking people dead to make a point. Ask the guy who's picking up sticks on Saturday. Was that guy saved? Probably. According to the faith works in the Old Testament guys, oh, well, he picked up sticks on Saturdays, therefore he lost his salvation. I would say the dude lost his physical salvation, struck dead.
by this faith, your works will show. See, they don't like that. They're trying to say, oh no, we're not lordship salvation. No, you are.
There's nothing wrong with.
We're
with
not
saying that your
lordship
works will save as
salvation.
a saved person.
I'm against the sinner's
The
prayer,
problem
Gene
is that
Kim.
if a person does not have works, then you automatically get to say that that person is not saved. There's the problem.
If you're going to be honest, because if they didn't have that work, then that faith didn't count. Then look
Faith
at
didn't
that.
count.
See, this is circular path.
The faith is the only thing that counts.
That's right.
The faith is the only thing that counts. If
And
you want
and
your life
I'm
to be a lot
asking, how
easier,
many people is
do
Gene
some
Kim
work.
sending to hell?
you don't want to get struck dead. You don't want to get flooded out. You build your boat. If you want to be blessed by God, bring children into your barren life. You pack up your things and you go out in the desert because God says you should do that. Go mess with the Canaanites.
Circular motion. Now, some other arguments that they might pull up, which is perhaps some pretty good questions, but to be quite honest, it's easily debunked. It's
Well,
easily debunked.
They're good
So-
questions. Thank you.
Turn to Romans chapter 2, please. Romans chapter 2, and then we'll read verse 13. Romans chapter 2, and then we'll read verse 13.
And we're
So let's-
certainly not
Romans chapter
lordship
2, verse 13.
salvationists.
I'm going to pause.
So he's clearly a
and
liar.
refill my coffee.
That Gene
Hopefully
Kim.
this thing will pause just fine and we can pick it up here. Okay, I'm back, and hopefully this is going to work. I've never paused a recording before midstream. And the clouds came in, so I'm sorry if I look like I'm in a cave. But while I was away, I did some thinking, and I want to bring up Jonah again, because this is probably the most powerful book against this works faith deal for salvation. And I did a full study on Jonah, and since I've done that, more and more revelations come out. I mean, it's a fantastic book for many reasons about a guy who didn't do what God wanted him to do. Okay, so we've established that Jonah is a prophet of God, saved guy, chosen to go preach at Nineveh, and he didn't do the works. He got killed and sent to hell. Now, see, doesn't that back up their argument? See, Jonah didn't do the work, so he got sent to hell. He got sent to hell as an example as to what he should preach when he goes to Nineveh. God was always going to bring him back. He still wanted him to go. He chose Jonah because he knew Jonah wouldn't do it,
Right.
and to be used as an example. And as also as an example of death, burial, resurrection of Christ. So Jonah goes and witnesses hell and is brought back, and now he can go to Nineveh and preach. And he's still mad about it. But you can imagine when he's saying, all you reprobates, originally he didn't go because he thought they were so reprobate, he didn't want them saved and wanted them to go to hell, probably without a full understanding of what hell exactly was. So he hopped on his boat and traveled far away until God stopped him. Now, knowing what hell was, he went into Nineveh and preached. And those people were afraid of hell for what he was talking about. He still did the works. Does that mean that Jonah was saved because he did that? No. Jonah was saved long before.
Yep.
You have a saved guy who refuses to do the works, gets killed for it. Continue on with Gene.
Let me explain this point right here. Romans chapter 2, and then we'll read verse 13. So here's another issue concerning these guys. Now here's something. Why do they have to try so hard? Why do they have to try so hard to get rid of what the verse is actually saying? Because here's the thing. If they insist, no, we're going by what the word exactly says, my question to them is this. As a first-timer who's genuine and without any bias about, oh, I strongly believe faith alone, not by works. Without that bias, if you're an honest Bible reader at the beginning, how come many people, when they read these verses, will normally think it's faith and works? And that's why you have so many cults and religions who use these verses to show you faith and works for salvation. Their problem, however, is that they don't divide.
Right.
Well,
rightly dividing as it plays a part in that. It certainly does. That's how you don't have any sort of faith and works system set up. These are the guys who want to put works back in. And they're trying to use dispensationalism to do that, which is completely contrary to dispensationalism.
We do is we read it and admit the honesty, but we divide. That's why we're dispensationalists.
Well,
These guys aren't dispensationalists.
You're hyper dispensationalist. You follow mainline dispensationalism until you come to this faith works in the Old Testament deal, and then you're hyperizing it.
We're the ones dividing it. You're not. Okay, now let's look at Romans chapter 2, verse 13.
And you're sending
Now,
people
there
to
are
hell,
three
Gene
problems
Kim.
that some people will bring up. Now, these
With
are
the sinner's
logical. I'll admit, these
prayer.
are logical. Some these
The
are
asking
sincere
doesn't
people.
save.
But to be very honest, they're still weak logical arguments.
Weak
If you
logical
insist
argument.
that people were saved by, faith and works for salvation in the Old Testament, then their one problem is then everyone but Jews went to hell. That's their argument. But it's easily debunked. Romans chapter 2, verse 13 through 15 shows you, no, the Gentiles who do not have the law follow their conscience.
Really?
I'll
Really?
read it, okay, in case some people...
Really? I will agree with that up to the point of age of accountability. Perhaps. Perhaps. But if works are a requirement for salvation, they are a requirement. God cannot deal unfairly with people.
That's
if he is
right.
requiring works of the Jews for their salvation, he must require works for everybody else because God is not a respecter of persons.
Accuse me for skimming. Oh, he's just skimming. No, I just don't have the luxury of time. Okay, so let me just read it for you. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the what? Doers of the law shall be what? Justified. See, Paul recognized that. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, see, they don't have the Old Testament law, do by nature the things contained in the law. That is true. It is human nature within our conscience to go by works, what is right. That is human nature. These having not a law are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their heart.
Even if their conscience was serving as the law, so that the Gentiles could be doing the law too, the law didn't save anybody.
It didn't.
The law didn't save anybody. You can say your conscience is the law. The law didn't save anybody. You can say all that stuff the Jews were doing was the law. None of them kept it. None of them. People don't go in line with their conscience. People double-cross their consciences probably on a daily basis. Maybe not daily, but often. Where they're like, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. What about people who don't have much of a conscience? They're saved because they don't have a conscience.
Hearts, their conscience also bearing witness. See that? So the conscience is going to bear witness, and God will judge them for that. That's why we don't worry about the Gentiles. Because if you want to
don't worry
say
about
that,
the Gentiles because it's a very difficult question with the doctrine that you have. If you have faith alone doctrine that the Bible teaches, you don't have that problem.
That's right.
You have a faith works doctrine, now you've got a problem. Now you have to figure out how the Gentiles can do works that will get them saved. Spiritual salvation. I guess it was their conscience, because Paul says something about conscience.
about the Gentiles, well, they didn't know about Old Testament salvation. What about Gentiles today? Do you know how many of them never heard about New Testament salvation or the gospel of Jesus?
Not
What are you
many.
going to do about that? See, you know what's more simple to believe? God is very understanding of people, so he'll judge them by how they do in their conscience.
Might judge them by their knowledge of God and their ignorance.
That's the idea. And depending how well they're sincere in their conscience, what's he going to do? He's going to show them more truth, like he did with many of you, right? That's why you eventually heard the gospel. If you're in the Old Testament, that's why you'll eventually hear the Old Testament law. or anything else. That's what God will do. But he's going to
God reveals himself to those who seek for him. Search, seek. God reveals himself. And obviously, things are different in different dispensations of time. Obviously, now today we have the internet and things like that, where it's pretty hard not to get the gospel. It's pretty hard not to have never heard of Jesus Christ. Pretty hard. Today you have active people who have heard the gospel and actively deny it. Who knows what was going back in the time of Abraham or the time of Noah, what was going on. Noah was preaching on his boat, but at that time, specifically, everyone's thoughts were evil continually. And the last righteous guy was Methuselah. We're going to wait until Methuselah dies because we can't wipe out righteous people with the wicked.
to judge them by conscience. He's not an unfair God. Now, they bring up this argument. Well, then what about the people who didn't know about salvation being changed? So all of a sudden, let's say that, I'm a person in the Old Testament. And
I'm thankful the guy's actually using some of my arguments. What about, is there a road sign somewhere? We're switching dispensations. God's road sign, maybe in the sky, says dispensation by faith works now. So everybody knows.
then all of a sudden, I'm in the church age, and I'm only one day in there.
Yep.
But I didn't know about that. Okay, so what about these people then? I guess they're going to go to hell if they died and they didn't know about this new change of salvation. Again, Romans 2, God judges you by conscience. God is understanding.
That's not
so
what,
he's not just going to
that's not
send
what it
some
is
guy
at all.
point.
It's not what it is at all. There was no such thing as faith works. It was faith. You go from faith, believing in the kingdom of heaven, as in the Jews, the time of Jesus Christ. And then you go into, this is even the apostles. Everybody is believing in the kingdom of heaven. All the way really up until I think is Steve, the church begins in Acts 7. But really you have the sending of the Holy Spirit and everything, I think Acts 2. And that's the beginning of the church. Those people that were still in the Old Testament before the death of Christ, they're still saved. They're still saved. And then they became members of the church.
5 seconds later, after Jesus died on.
And that's the difference in that they had the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Doesn't mean that they weren't saved before, and then all of a sudden they are saved with the death of Christ, death and resurrection.
On the cross, you're going to burn in hell. No, he's going to go by.
I kind of get the idea that if you had faith in works, then these guys don't think that you went to Abraham's bosom, and they think because you had works, you went straight to heaven or something. It's kind of a weird doctrinal thing. Is no, before Christ died, everybody went to Abraham's bosom, which is part of hell. But if you had works, you went to heaven? Is that what they're getting at?
Conscience. See, God is very obvious. Now, here's their third argument. Then they're going to say, how do you know which works to do then? Okay, then if you claim by works, then what are the works?
Yeah.
And didn't Paul say they couldn't keep the whole law? So what do? You know what the simple answer again is? Romans 2 by conscience. See, that's why God judges by conscience.
It's so simple. It's so simple. What do we even need the gospel for? Isn't it better then that nobody has ever heard of the Bible at all and people just all live by conscience? It solves so many problems, right? Whatever you do, if you have children, don't raise them up to know about the Bible and Jesus Christ and God. Just let them live by their conscience and hope that they never hear the gospel because they'll be saved by their conscience. Raise them up to be good people, right? Good little atheists. Because they're saved by their conscience. They're saved by their conscience. You don't think atheists today have consciences? Consciences? Oh, but we're in a different dispensation, so now they need to believe in Jesus. Well, what if they choose not to hear anything about Jesus? And they're going to operate on their conscience. Now we have a choice in how we're getting saved. Do you think the Jews would pick all of these crazy works they got to do? or
No,
just being judged on their conscience? I don't even need
they're
faith
saved
then
by faith.
with just being judged on a conscience. Don't even need that. Interesting idea and an interesting doctrine. I have never heard of it, but it's amazing. You see, Gene here is laughing at people like me and people like Ed who are saying it's faith alone throughout the entire Bible. And he's using arguments like these people are saved by conscience. Yeah, the Jews were saved by faith and their works. Everybody else was saved by conscience. To throw out the argument of God's fairness and justness in dealing with people. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
I obviously don't know what's on your conscience. You don't know what's in mine. So how can I tell you the works? Only God knows. So God is understanding, sympathetic. It's the same thing what God does with people
You know, that sounds
today
like that actually sounds like a very new age. That sounds exactly like if you ask someone and they go to heaven, if they're going to go to heaven or not, and they say, well, I'm a good person.
There's
Doesn't everybody think
none
they're a good person?
righteous, not one.
So someone who has a Gentile back in the time of the law, because they believe they're a good person, then they get to go to heaven. They think that they follow their conscience, whatever their conscience may lead them to do. Paul didn't have a problem. Paul's conscience was not bothering him at all, rounding up Christians at all. He thought he was doing a good job until God laid the smack down on him. Paul was a guy, Hebrew of Hebrews, who followed the law to the letter. Thought he did a good job in going out persecuting Christians, following his conscience. So he had faith, he had the law, and he had his conscience. His conscience was disrupted when he got knocked off his horse. Oh, it's saved by my conscience. We're gonna can say that to yourself when you're doing your Christian yoga.
every time. He understands people. He'll judge them by their heart, by their conscience. So we are in no place to judge them at their heart. And yes, it is true. Jews cannot keep the whole law. No one could. But
Here
you know
goes
what
your
the
argument.
simple answer to that is, which is what we believe in.
You just wrecked your entire argument, Gene. Your argument is that people are saved by faith plus works. And you are saying that no one could ever keep the law. Therefore, no one was ever saved. Therefore, their works never did anything.
Exactly.
We believe that's why they could not go to heaven. They had to go to Abraham's bosom, which is located in hell.
Yeah, they had to go down there with everybody else who was saved. Yeah. What are these works doing? We still have not answered this question of what are a person's works doing to warrant their spiritual salvation in going to heaven. What are they doing? Gene Kim
Nothing.
just said nobody could keep the law.
That's right.
Their entire argument is that you needed faith plus the law plus works in the Old Testament to go to heaven. Yet they argue for it.
And remember, hell's a location where all sins are kept. But Abraham's bosom is a place of comfort where hell is located. So they went there. Why? Because God's not cruel. God understands. Well, they were saved by faith. But again, I argued all the way at the beginning, what was the faith then in then? You're arguing for an empty faith. Now, I'm not going to go through all that notion again, okay?
Arguing for an empty faith. No, you believe God.
That's right.
You worship God.
That's right, Max.
You didn't have to be a Jew to do that.
So what did they have to do? They had to go. It's more simple to say, it's more honest to say, by Hebrews 11 or any verse in the Bible, they had faith, believing in what God said, and there were works. Why? Because it said, faith is said, works. It showed works. Okay.
Show
So
works.
God put them here at a temporary basis. That makes a lot of sense. And then the
Yeah.
cross of Jesus Christ had to pay it all for them. And then they went up. That's why no one kept the whole law. It's obvious. So they went down here.
Again, we agree. We all agree on this part where before the cross, everybody went to Abraham's bosom.
That's
What
right.
he is saying here, though, is that if the Jews kept the law correctly, they'd go immediately to heaven. And then he's also saying that nobody can keep the law, obviously. But then he reverts back to saying it's faith plus works for salvation. What a jumbled mess this is. What a jumbled mess. So he says he got faith plus works in the Old Testament. Noah had to build a boat, and that warranted his place in heaven because he built a boat. Okay. We'll go on to Moses, 10 Commandments, and all of the Levitical laws. They had faith and they had to do those works to warrant their salvation to go into heaven, but they couldn't keep the works, so they ended up in Abraham's bosom. What? As opposed to everybody was always saved by faith and they went to paradise, Abraham's bosom. What does works have to do with any of it? It seems to me like works is kind of a runaround. It's a circle jerk. Doesn't it?
Yep.
And the works are only things that the Jews did. Because they are the ambassadors for God. They are the ones bringing God into the world. They have their own special religion God set up through Abraham. He wanted his own religion. His own stuff started with one person who wasn't involved in any idolatry or anything like that. Started from one guy who was righteous and very faithful. But apparently that has something to do with salvation. We're back to like the Jews or the Gentiles being saved. And we're going to, I guess, divert to conscience. I guess if you had a good conscience, you went to Abraham's bosom. Where is that in the Bible?
Jesus fulfilled the law for them and they went up. That's what makes sense. But God is not a God where he's going to give them some empty faith or empty grace and then allow them to go scot-free, because sin must be punished with hellfire.
Okay. Again, he's saying faith and works are necessary to warrant your salvation into heaven. And then he brings the character of God in that say God cannot allow them into heaven because they didn't do the works. What is their works for again? I mean, like, he contradicts himself 1 minute to the next, 1 second to the next. Like, he's saying works didn't do anything for these Jews, so they ended up in Abraham's bosom. Yet they were saved by faith and works in the Old Testament. But the works did nothing because no one could keep them. No one could keep the law. I guess if you say it fast enough and people don't sit and think about it, maybe it makes sense. But don't bring the character of God in this, because then you have this whole problem of, again, some people are saved just by their conscience. And then some other people have to do all these works for their salvation. God is not a fair, just God. God is a respecter of persons. If you're a Jew, you get this stuff. If you're everybody else, you get this stuff.
See, they accuse us for attacking the attribute of God's grace. No, you're attacking the attribute of God's grace and his holiness together, because we argue his grace is only, his full grace where you can get true salvation by grace is at the cross. I'm not going to go 2,000 years, 4,000 years before that without his death and his payment and think that I can go scot-free. And
what are you talking about? It's by grace that everybody was saved.
That's right.
The only way anyone could be saved is by grace. You can't do any works to get into heaven.
Exactly.
You made a big mistake bringing up the character of God, because that completely destroys everything you're talking about. And you go from 1 second faith works absolutely required to getting even into Abraham's bosom, to the next second saying it's your conscience, to the next second the people in Abraham's bosom weren't actually truly saved because they didn't keep the works, and no one was saved until the cross. Just a minute ago, he said that people were saved basically on credit, and now he's saying no one was saved until the actual cross. No, I'd say that no one was ascended to heaven until the cross, but they're saved people.
So you accuse us we're bad for works? You're more worse than us by emptying the works and emptying the faith. That's even worse. So at least we can give some kind of support over here. So they had to have the grace right here to pay them what they had in their faith, and that the cross of Jesus Christ had to fulfill all the law for them and the works. Why? Why did they have to have that faith and work? Simple, because there was no cross of Jesus. So they have to do something.
We have to do something. That is Old Testament Lordship salvation, my friends. Oh, we got to do something. We got to do something. This is where like all these denominations and the cults and all the Catholic denominations that are out there, they have to do something. They got to do something. It can't just be faith alone. It can't just be faith alone. People just they want to do something. I want to be able to do something to warrant my salvation. So when I'm face to face with God, I can say, look at my wonderful works. Look at that. Let me into heaven. You owe me, God. You owe me.
No,
I did all that stuff. I didn't eat shellfish. I
God
loved
doesn't
shrimp.
owe
And I
anyone
gave it all up for
anything
you.
by grace,
This is the ridiculousness
by
of
faith.
what he's saying. This, for the most part, I am hearing for the first time. So I'm sorry if my thoughts are not completely collected. If you have any questions about this stuff, please put them in the comments. I mean, I'm sure I'll end up doing more videos on this. But wow. Really, he cannot justify works anywhere. And you get to the end of this video, there's only like 20 seconds left. You get to this end of the video, he even says himself that works didn't mean anything. Works were nothing. They didn't do anything for anybody. Yet we still want to insist that people were saved spiritually by works.
And they
Unless you're a
work.
Gentile.
And
Or
they
a Hebrew who
work.
wasn't a Jew. Then you didn't just got your conscience. Your conscience. Okay. Your conscience also bears witness to you.
Too much double talk by Gene
God
Kim.
had to judge sin. That's the idea. So that's the argument against these notions.
Okay. And I guess that was it. Well, once again, I appreciate that Gene Kim actually has answered or attempted to answer the problems that we have in his Ruckmanite doctrine. I think that that's a wonderful thing. People want to be mad. Why aren't you down on Robert and all these other people? And it's like, well, I've talked with him quite a bit. We both have videos, and out of our discussions, we both learn more, and we both come out with videos expressing our point. And of course, Robert is still in the camp with the Ruckmanites, who believe this dispensational salvation deal. Does that make him a bad guy? No,
No.
it means he preaches a kooky doctrine in that area, which really it comes from Ruckman. So really, anyone who is trained by Ruckman, you can expect them to have this nutty idea. Does that mean everything that they do is going to be crazy? No. A lot of good teachings come out of those guys. However, it's plain to see here that me, who's just a guy, can destroy their arguments on the faith work system. And I'm assuming here that it's only when you take this faith work system for the Old Testament Jews and you bring it forward into the tribulation Jews, you're going to have some huge problems. And then bringing it forward again into the millennial reign,
That's right.
you're going to have more problems. So this is a doctrine of theirs that starts out fairly simple. Jews under the law are saved by faith plus works. And, you can kind of say, if that's what you want to believe, whatever. Okay. But then it expands into creating contradictions in New Testament books like James, and then you have to add James and apply that to the Old Testament Jews under the law, and then you have to take the law and put it into the tribulation, and you have to then go to the entire Old Testament. That must be the way that it always was in the Old Testament until the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. See, it starts with something small, like, well, the Jews, because of their position with God, were saved by works plus faith, because they're Jews and they're special. Okay. But then you're opening up to all the Old Testament people, and it's like, well, now you got Gentiles in there. And God would not be a just God if he only allowed salvation of Jewish people. We are all saved through the Jews, but just to allow salvation only of the Jews would not be fair and just of God. So now you have to figure out a works salvation doctrine for all these people who aren't Jews. Good luck. And then you have to admit that the works did nothing to warrant your salvation. Why are you teaching the doctrine then? Why are you teaching the doctrine? If it completely doesn't make sense coming out of your own mouth, as Gene Kim has stated here,
Yep.
why do you continue to teach it? And the answer is with Gene Kim is because he's a professor or a teacher or something for PBI Institute, or an affiliate of PBI Institute, where his job may be on the line. Maybe they have 6 months. They teach this stuff so much. I've seen Gene Kim bring this up in the last couple of months, like a lot. Maybe this is like a 6-month course, Dispensational Salvation by Peter Ruckman, that you just got to indoctrinate people, indoctrinate them. This is what we teach, and this is Ruckman thing. Again, some of these guys that are really full of themselves, these Bible teachers out here, need to have their own kooky idea, their own kooky doctrine that sets them apart from everybody else, because they're vain. They're like, yeah, I'm puffed up. I got my own kooky doctrine, and look how many people are following my kooky doctrine. Look how many people are seeing the Bible the way I see it. I think that's what's going on with the Ruckman thing.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on with that. And it's interesting they don't really preach on some of these other kooky doctrines that Ruckman teaches. I think this is the one that just comes, it's close enough to faith work system, to like the cults and stuff like that we can get away with it. We can get away with it a little bit. Well, lordship salvation in the Old Testament for the Jews, yeah, we can get away with that. Where you can't really get away with other things that Ruckman taught that were way out there. Interesting. Once again, I don't have a PhD in this stuff, but it sounds like Gene Kim and some of these guys aren't aware of what foundation of dispensation, what they teach. I am not fully up on that stuff myself, but from what I gather from people writing about it, everybody has said that dispensationalism teaches faith through grace in every dispensation. And that is, before I even knew that, I came to that conclusion on my own. Okay, it wasn't, Ed showed me this, or so-and-so showed me this, or so-and-so. I came to that conclusion on my own after I was free from the pollution of guys like Denlinger. Once I was free from that garbage, I was allowed to think and see things clearly. So there we have it. Another hour-long video dealing with Gene Kim. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this stuff goes. I'd really like to see more people actually speak out about this and directly to this doctrine. It is more serious than I thought, like I said. A year ago or 2 years ago, when I first kind of heard about it, of course, Brian Denlinger always teach that, and I was kind of in that camp where it's like, seems like the Jews had to do a lot of works, but I don't know. I hadn't really studied it. And then came to the faith throughout the Bible, just from growth and understanding. Holy Ghost showing me things. I don't see how you can see it any other way now that I'm in this position. Especially you bring in, again, the character of God into account.
Yep.
God's got to be just. God's got to be fair. God's got to be truthful. God is unchanging. Now you can say he changed his mind on this or that. He changed in the way he was going to achieve a goal of his. It's the same goal that he has. He changed the way that he goes about achieving the goal. When you're talking about something about salvation for people, eternal salvation, God is unchanging. And it would be unfair of him and unjust of him to do so. There you have it. With that, we're out of here.
Good. Thank you, Max. Now I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll go to live chat on mute. This was just a spur of the moment live stream. Right now. Hello, Deb. Hello, Darren. Hello, Shep. Hi, Linda. Yeah. I'm definitely against the faith plus works in any dispensation, and Deb, also Gene Kim has a sinner's prayer, which the asking doesn't help. So I'm wondering how many people is Gene leading to hell. Hi, mate. Hi, morality. Oh, right. So Deb's just gone. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Anyone got else to say in the live chat? Okay. Morality asks, do you watch Gab the Street Preacher? No, I don't. No, I haven't. No, mate, I haven't. Sorry, I haven't yet. No. Yeah, maybe one day. Anyway, I think it's getting a bit late over there. I might go because so I'll say goodbye to everyone. Okay, all right. Bye, morality. Bye, Darren. Bye, Shep. Yep. Okay, bye.